Hey there, students. I wanted to make a video to demonstrate how to use StatCrunch to make a frequency polygon. Now, we are required on the project at the end of the semester to make a frequency polygon with the data that's collected. So you'll want to know how to do that in StatCrunch for the project. I didn't really see a frequency polygon problem show up in the problems that got pulled for the homework for Chapter 2. But there is a randomness in which problems are chosen. You may end up having one on the quiz because that gets pulled randomly for each student, or on the midterm. But definitely we need to know how to do it for the project anyway. So I grabbed a problem from Chapter 2 from the test bank to illustrate how to make a frequency polygon. So this is from Chapter 2, Section 3. And the problem states that we are given data represent the number of people from a town aged 25 through 64 who subscribe to a certain print magazine. And they want us to construct a frequency polygon and then analyze it a little bit. But let's focus on the construction. So they gave us 4 graphs to choose from. So you could do this problem by looking at the data that they gave us and try to match it with the correct graph. But we do need to make a frequency polygon from data ourselves for our project. So let's just go through that process, and then in this case we can create one and use it to pick the correct graph as well to do this problem. So the way they've presented the data to us is that we have classes here, and then the frequency in each class. For example, the first class is the ages between 25 through 34, and then the next one starts at 35, goes to 44. So we can see that the class widths are 10, because it goes from the starting value of 25, 35, 45, 55. It's jumping 10 each time. So the class width is 10, and it begins at 25. So how would I convert the Well, first of all, what they gave us was a frequency table with classes. That would be very easy to make into a histogram. The classes are already created. But a frequency polygon doesn't actually have the classes. Instead of the classes along the horizontal axis, it uses the midpoint values of each class. And they did not give that to us, so we're going to have to do that little bit of work ourselves. So let me show you how to do that. First, I would move the data over to StatCrunch, open it in StatCrunch. And so you'll see in StatCrunch that what they did is they created one column for the classes, because that's how it was presented, and then one column for the frequencies. So what we want to do to give StatCrunch what it needs to make a frequency polygon is, instead of classes, we want to change the classes to simply have the midpoint values in each of those classes. So for example, looking at the first class, the values go from 25 to 34. So what I want to do is give the midpoint of that range of values. And the simplest way to do that is to average the upper and lower values of the class, meaning add them up, and since there's 2 of them, divide by 2. So I've got a little Windows calculator here. So I could do that by saying 25 plus 34, and that comes out equal to 59. And then I would divide that by 2 to get the average of those 2 values, which is 29.5. So that means the midpoint between 25 to 34 is 29.5. So I'm going to replace that class range of values instead with the midpoint, which is 29.5. And I want to do that for each of the classes. Now, the classes are going up 10 each time. That means the midpoint will also go up 10 each time. I could average each pair of values, but the next one will be 39.5. And then when we go to the next one, we'll get 49.5. And then we will get 59.5 for the last one. Now, you may also have observed from the examples that the convention for a frequency polygon is to also start with a class before the data values begin and finish with the class after they've finished. So what we want to do is we want to add a class with nothing in it that would be the one preceding the very first one where the data showed up. So since they're varying by 10 in each class, I want to add a class before the one that has 29.5 that starts with 19.5. So I need to create a new sort of row here. I'm going to go into StatCrunch and click on the little down arrow for row 1, and it says insert one above. So that will create a new row right above it. And then for the age midpoint, I'm going to put 19.5. And then for the number of people in that midpoint class, I'm going to put 0 because there was actually nothing in the class before the first one. And then similarly on the end, I'm going to add a class on the end that jumps up to 69.5 and also has no data in it. So that way I've capped off the ends of my frequency polygon. And you can also see in, well, at least 3 of the 4 choices they offered, they also start and end with 0 points in the frequency polygons. And that's what we want to have. So now what we have here is we have, instead of classes, we have midpoints of classes, and we have the frequencies for those classes associated with the midpoints of those classes, and that the graph of those pairs of points will produce the frequency polygon that we want. So let's see how we would do that. I would go over to Graph and then go to Chart by Columns. Then in the columns, I want to create the vertical axis by using the people data. So I'm going to select the column of people. But then the row labels are the midpoints. So where it says row labels, those are in the column that's called age. Then in addition to that, I want to tell it what I want to plot. I need to make a little more room here. Make this bigger. There we go. So I want to, instead of plotting horizontal bars, which might make a bar graph or a histogram, I want to plot points, and I want to connect them with lines. So there's one of our choices, points with connected lines. So now my points will have across the bottom the midpoint values of the classes, and then have along the vertical axis the frequency values of the people. And then I'm going to connect those points with lines, and that creates a frequency polygon. So I'm going to hit compute, and there we get our picture. So that's how you make a frequency polygon. We can see that does match up, it looks like, with D. It looks like the A and D both have the 19.5 to start and the 69.5 to finish with 0 values. But they kind of reversed it here, and it looks like the one we want is D. So anyway, so there's a little bit of work here because StatCrunch doesn't immediately make it the way we want, but with a little massaging, we can turn class ranges of values into midpoint values, and then make sure we have a midpoint value above and below the actual ranges that we had, so our polygon goes up from 0 and then comes back to 0. And then we can make a nice frequency polygon. So hopefully that'll make it so that you guys can reference this video when you need to do that for your project, or maybe if you end up getting one of these problems on a quiz or something, you'll know how to do it. Keep up the hard work and reference this video if you need to know how to make a frequency polygon.